everything.
Totally, yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
and then we go into the drying process, and we have to be careful in order not to have dentin over dry and not to
Yes,
have dentin over wet. So basically what I do, I dry rub enamel around, and I have reflected air that goes to enamel, and enamel becomes dry and dentin still is wet. Then I take
right.
suction, take out the pipe from the suction. I will show which one, just a second. Here, I'm taking this out, and I just a little bit of the water from with my suction system. And then
And
afterwards,
now there is one thing, let me tell you a detail also that many dentists, they miss that point. I see that when I give CE courses, is that while they dry the dentin and they go like you did with the tip, they go very close. And I deal with that all the time with my students. They touch the enamel margins with
yeah, okay.
the instruments, and that you should avoid at all costs, because you see, even when with the next step, when you are going to apply the primer, I see people brush the primer in the undercut, and while they do that, they rub the enamel that they just etched, they rub it with the plastic of the brush. That's a big problem.
Oh wow, that is the tip, guys. Write down all these tips.
Right,
Don't touch
yes.
enamel with a suction. Don't touch enamel with a brush, with a plastic part of the brush.
Otherwise, you will have a lot of white line in your margins.
Yeah, see how many tips. Oh my God. So actually next, applying up primer, we have to apply correct amount of the primer. So basically it's written in instruction. We apply it actively for 20 seconds, apply, and then we dry. And there is
Yeah,
another tip that I learned from yesterday. We dry it in the way to remove the solvent, but to keep dentin slightly shiny, correct?
exactly. Exactly. So the idea is that I try when I dry the dentin, like I think you said that before when you were drying the tooth, to apply a laminar flux of air. So you go, let's say, from lingual with the suction, from buccal with the air, parallel to the occlusal surface. So in that way, what happens? The air really dries the enamel very well because it's at the surface, and the dentin stays a little bit moist, right? And then you look at the dentin, and the dentin should look shiny, but no movement of fluids. And you could, if it's dry correctly, you should be able to see the roughness that you created with the burr, but it's still shiny. And that means, and I know you will agree with me like a 500%, that means you need good magnification for that, right?
Magnification.
Magnification, man.
Love it.
At least 8.0.
Wow, you switched into the 9 I heard yesterday.
Well, no, I just added
The 9.
the reading modification to my glasses, which is a small loop. It's an additional lens if you want. Huh?
Okay.
It makes reading magnification. It's like you can add 1 point time there or two times, and that reduces the distance that you work.
Okay, correct.
So I work at a very short working distance. People are usually shocked to see why, because if I go 8.0 and I decrease the distance, I can reach 9 or 9.5. Yeah.
Well, so let's go back. Primer,
Yes.
20 seconds, active application. Don't touch enamel with a plastic part of the brush. Then we dry in
Yes.
order to have it.
And the
shiny.
dentin, the primer of the dentin. Apply as many layers as you want. I mean, the more you want to saturate the dentin. So usually I apply the primer twice, 2 times 20 seconds, even
Okay.
sometimes 3 times. And
Great.
you have to look at the dentin. There are some teeth, when you dry, suddenly the dentin is dull again. That means you need to reapply until it's shiny.
Okay, nice point, by the way. Thank you. Okay, and then we finally apply adhesive, which is second bottle. We apply to enamel and to dentin. I would like to just mention one more time. So we're discussing classic protocol, including enamel
Right.
and dentin bonding. It's not
Right.
ideal.
And what adhesive? What adhesive? What type of adhesive are you applying? Because that will influence the technique too.
Yeah, we're talking about Total Edge, the two-bottle system, fourth
Right?
generation
But
optimal.
field adhesive or
Field.
unfilled adhesive?
Ah, okay.
Field.
Field adhesive. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Good
Okay.
point, by the
So
way.
that
That's good
because
point.
that's different. So
Good point.
you see, here my point is I highly suggest a field adhesive. And the reason is that a field adhesive is more viscous and it will make a more uniform layer. This is why OptiBond FL is such a unique product, you know, because because of the filler, by the way, which is radio opaque. It's a radio opaque filler. You have to have radio opacity if you have a thick filler. And my point is that a thick adhesive. And my point is that the adhesive make a more uniform layer and the thickness. And even if you would air dry gently the adhesive, it is still thicker than the oxygen inhibition layer. And that's very important. That's why I suggest a filled adhesive. SE bond, I believe, is filled too, but much, much less than OptiBond FL. In OptiBond FL, you know what means F and L? Filled, light cured, right? Because the first version of OptiBond was dual cure. Yeah, it was called OptiBond. And when in 1992, can you believe that, Maxime? OptiBond came on the market in 1992, and in 1994 they came with FL with the radio opaque filler. I mean, at the beginning the filler was not radio opaque; it was later on.
Yeah, it was in 1995.
Right,
radio opaque filler. 1994 was not radio opaque.
Or maybe even later. I think the radio opaque filler was even later than 95.
Okay.
So you apply the adhesive.
We're applying adhesive. We have to keep thick layer of adhesive on dentin and thin layer of adhesive on enamel. Okay. Totally. If we are using highly filled bonding agent, it's okay. If we don't have filled adhesive, so we can reinforce our hybrid layer by adding of the thin layer of flowable composite. Is it correct?
Exactly. And that's the point. And that's what I would do with SE bond.
Okay.
Exactly.
One question. Before you apply flowable composite, do you light cure SE bond or you apply SE bond?
Yes.
And you
light cure, and then you apply the
total edge system like SE bond utilization. So in this case, we go for selective edge.
Self-edge.
Yeah,
self-edge.
So we do selective edge with edge enamel for 30 seconds. Okay.
Okay. So you have two ways.
I would like to make it just a step by step.
Yes. So if you use a self-etching agent,
okay.
Actually, there is two ways. I would say there is the productive way, and then there is the maniac way. The maniac. Okay. So the production, the efficient way would be, yes, you have to etch enamel separately for sure. You cannot trust the self-etch on enamel. Okay, so you have to etch enamel and then apply your self-etch and then apply your adhesive. But the maniac way would be to seal the dentin first. With your self-etch.
Okay.
Then re-prep your enamel margins, and then you etch everything, and then you apply the adhesive to enamel and the sealed dentin. That's the way to do it if you are a maniac of adhesive. Why? Because how do you etch Maxime enamel? Yes, with the microscope maybe you can do it, but you know, I'm thinking about daily practice. How do you etch enamel?
It depends on the surface. Yeah, sometimes we can use that like a cotton pellets to protect dentin if we have class 1 or class 2 cavities, and we just enamel. We use
so if you want, I like to say immediate dentin sealing is the ideal way of applying a self-etching.
Now I agree with that. I didn't know this, by the way, since yesterday. So I learned this technique.
Yes.
Nice. Always learning from you. Always. That is nice. So, okay, self-etching. Then we do acid primer for the dentine actively, then you dry, then we apply adhesive, both on enamel and dentine, keeping thick layer on the dentine and reinforce light cure, and then we reinforce hybrid layer with a flowable composite in this case. So that is technique.
If it's a self-etch,
If it
yes.
is, yeah, we are talking now about self-etch. So this is technique, guys, that you have to keep in your mind to have good results. You cannot skip any of these steps. Otherwise, skipping of any of these steps will compromise the result that you may achieve later on. That's why the process is, I feel as clinician, the process takes time. We have to admire that. And in case when I prep, for example, 10 veneer units, and imagine that I exposed dentin for all of these 10 veneers, 10 teeth after preparation, I will have to go like half an hour, maybe 40 minutes just for the idea. It doesn't result. This is what they can say for sometimes. But what I can say from my time, from my side, sorry, since I started to use IDS, I sleep well. Okay, my phone is
Oh,
not
and
ringing.
then, but Maxim, um, what happens if you have post-operative sensitivity under a veneer? That can be a huge problem. I've seen
Exactly,
it. I've
exactly.
seen, veneer cases that were sent to me because they had sensitivity. And when I read the protocol, they didn't use IDS. I saw onlays that had sensitivities. The IDS was not done. And so now the consequences, you can pay that. It's very expensive. So this, let's say on an online preparation, you are going to spend maybe 3 minutes doing IDS, and then you have, it's for 3 minutes, it's like the best investment you have.
Otherwise, you have to
I don't
redo
think
restoration, huh?
redoing the restoration is much, much, much more
Much more
expensive. Not
expensive.
to talk about the pain and the time the patient has to come back to the chair. And not to talk about sensitivity during the provisional stages, all the other things. I mean, honestly, the time factor to me, it's a very weak argument. Yeah.
Same here. I'm a slow dentist. I can play with the adhesive for a long time. So basically, what is the main benefit that I got from the IDS since I started to use it is that the post-operative cases that now I have is almost zero. I have few because
Exactly,
sometimes we
exactly.
have
And
some those.
Maxim, not only that, but I had a dentist come to me. He took my course like you did in Geneva, but it was in San Francisco. And then he sent me a message. He said, it's unbelievable. My rate of endodontics has dropped completely. So it's, and I've seen that, it's very sad when you lose a pulp because you messed up the bond. That's a disaster.
Yeah,
You
exactly. Great.
open the circle of death of a tooth because of a bad bonding. That's really, really sad. And so what you first one to publish that. I have to send you this article. It was in Quintessence International back in 1992, I think. And so that's when we discovered immediate dentin sealing, and we did the same experiments, no gaps, no gaps. And Maxime, the literature is huge about that. Not only our articles, is researchers from all around the world have proven now that this
there are
gap,
many independent resources nowadays. Proved
this gap is the result of the adhesive not being polymerized. So you have to polymerize the adhesive before placing the restoration. And that's the essence of immediate dentin sealing. If you place the adhesive and you have a preparation that is very irregular, you cannot prevent the adhesive to be thick in concavities and thin in convexities. And in the concavities, that thickness might exceed the dye spacer. And that's why the restoration will not see it unless you place the adhesive before taking your impression. And that is the fundamentals of immediate dentin sealing. And so, you don't need a lot of research. You don't need to be Einstein or a Nobel Prize to understand that. This is just common sense.
Correct, exactly.
No evidence needed. It's like if you are on an airplane and you have a parachute and the plane crashes, do you have more chance to survive with the parachute or without the parachute? Maxime, right? Okay, do you need a study to prove that?
No, actually, no. Okay, so let's go back. Clinical benefits that we as a practitioners can feel less post-operative sensitivity since we start to use IDS in a proper way. This is highlight the proper way. Then
totally.
there is no way to have dentin contaminated with bacteria because the provisional restoration that we use, they are not perfect, they are not hermetic. So the result is there is to have the contamination. So that is the another clinical proof.
One more thing, the seal. Imagine when you do a pulp exposure, of course should not happen, but let's say accidental exposure of a pulp, you seal the exposure, whatever you want. I don't care, calcium hydroxide, MTA, that's not the point. The point is no bacteria. And so how do you obtain that? Immediate dentin sealing. That's the answer. So immediate dentin sealing after pulp exposure is absolutely fundamental. Why? Because if you restore, you don't want to restore that tooth definitively, immediately. Why? Because the shrinkage of the composite is going to pull on your adhesive. You might have a gap. You want to do IDS and place a totally non-shrinking material on top and let the tooth heal. That's the best. It's IDS. Another thing, same with endodontically treated teeth. IDS, I said that yesterday. I consider endodontically treated teeth as the same as a pulp exposure. The canal must be sealed 100%. So, and there is a new thing. You can seal the dentin before you do endo. It's actually even better because then you prevent the dentin to be contaminated by all the products that you use during endo. And then you complete that sealing after you finish endo. You do double IDS when you do endo. And that's been published, by the way, by someone. There's an article about pre-endodontic sealing.
Nice.
So it's pre-endodontic dentin sealing, okay?
Perfect. So let me explain now clinical steps for audience about IDS, okay, when we do preparations. Just briefly to get the closed circle for them to take this information away. So when we prep, for example, inlays or overlays or crown lays, whatever, we have some cavities. In this case, after we finished our preparation, we do IDS, which means bonding protocol in dentin, including rubber dam isolation, roughening of the dentin, and all the steps that we have already discussed. Okay, we cover dentin exposed with a little bit of portion of enamel in the periphery with adhesive. And then undercuts that we have out of carious excavation can be filled with flowable composite or bulk fill composite or packable composite. So basically we're doing this thing that is called CDO, Cavity Design Optimization by Didier Dici. By the way, he will be here
Yes, yes,
during
yes.
live
And
stream
what
very
I
soon.
call, yeah, and I like also the terminology of Dr. David Alman, which is the biobase.
Biobase. Okay, so we do this
So,
biobase.
and one thing more, Maxim, is it's not only filling undercuts, it could be also making a small dentin build up so that your restoration is not so thick.
Exactly, for
And
light
that you
curing
can
material.
easily polymerize the luting agent through the restoration. Yes.
Perfect. That's why I'm not doing endocrowns, because I want to work with my
Right.
light curable material. So I do build up, decreasing the thickness of
Totally.
material. I mean, ceramic or
Yes.
indirect
You know,
composite.
there is one situation where I would suggest the endocrown is when you have very little occlusal clearance. And when you have low occlusal clearance on an endodontically treated tooth, you want to use the endo design because it gives you more thickness of material in the central groove. And
Okay.
I would suggest that when you have short clinical crowns, I suggest the endo crown, of course. Yeah. But
Perfect.
otherwise, I agree with you. A small dentin buildup is my first choice.
Yeah, perfect. So then we refine our enamel with a fine diamond, and then we can take impression actually. So this is when we have cavities.
Well,
But
one more thing. Impression will interact with IDS,
oxygen
as you
inhibited.
know.
Yeah. I
So,
forgot.
so here, it's difficult to say, but different adhesive will have different thicknesses of oxygen inhibition. And when you air block the surface with glycerin, which is always recommended at the end to minimize, and actually air block will not eliminate completely the oxygen inhibition layer, it will minimize. And that means that there is still a thin unpolymerized layer. And we look at the microscope, if you take a PVS impression, you will see a tiny unpolymerized layer of material. So what you have to do is you have to physically remove that layer by gently pumicing and cleaning the surface before you take your impression.
Especially for polyether materials like Impregnum.
No, polyether, you have another problem. It's the opposite, actually, is stick.
Fix, yeah.
So if you clean, so if you have a fresh layer of Optibond FL, you air block it, and then you remove, you pumice it. Polyethers, that is a little bit, it is very interesting because Optibond FL adhesive is a little bit hydrophilic. That's a little bit the miracle of Optibond FL. There's a little bit of HEMA in the adhesive. And so polyethers will stick to the Optibond FL because of that hydrophilicity. And then you have adherences. And you know, Maxim, what's the only way to avoid 100% of those adherences is to cover with flowable composite. Okay. So, because flowable composite will not generate adherences with polyethers. So, it's the only indication if you want to have a flowable layer, which would not be for design optimization, would be if you use a polyether material.
Nice, thanks. Can we remove this oxygen inhibited layer with alcohol, wiping out this with alcohol?
Yeah, I would tend to say yes. But to be honest with you, I don't think we have any data about that. The problem with alcohol, I'm afraid that it will remove a lot of unpolymerized monomers that may be needed when we bond back. I don't know the answer of that, to be honest with you. I would tend to say yes, but my first choice would be physically removing it with pumps.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know that
because you know, when we come back, we bond back to that layer. And alcohol, we know, is a solvent of unpolymerized resin. So you don't want to completely remove this, but keep some monomers, right? Because you need them for bonding back. Now, we know that Optibond FL will not polymerize more than 50% of conversion rate, which is very good news, because that means 50% is still available for resin to resin bonding. And that's also a question I would like to answer, is like, when you come back to bond to that layer, you can come back weeks later. We made a study where we waited until 12 weeks with a provisional and came back and removed that and air abraded the OptiBond FL layer. And again, with immediate dentin sealing, I want your audience to understand this. If the IDS layer is too thin, how do you clean it predictably without reopening dentin? That's the problem. So with OptiBond FL, because of the adhesive, because of the thickness, when you air braid it, and because of the uniform thickness, you have less risk of re-exposing dentin. And one more thing, Maxime, this is super important. A lot of people are having, not a lot, I hope, but I hear people having postoperative sensitivity with IDS. I even saw oh my gosh, a study published showing that IDS doesn't work and it's not useful. And what you see in the microscope, scanning electron microscope, is that the surfaces where the group that was IDS, the dentin tubules were open.
Reopened because of the refreshment.
That means they didn't use, air block. They didn't, the adhesive was air thinned. And so it didn't polymerize. And that's what I want you to remember. Thin layers of adhesive do not polymerize well. And that's why you have to be careful. So imagine you place a very thin layer of adhesive, you don't air block it, you come back, you air braid it, it's gone. And then you have sensitivity. And then you say, oh, IDS doesn't work. You understand the problem. This is very important. So when you air braid, and as I said yesterday, I'm a human being. So sometimes my adhesive is a little bit thin here, or I didn't extend enough. So I see a tiny little exposure of dentin after I have already etched. Now you need to take care of that by reapplying a little bit of primer there. Then you apply the adhesive, you don't polymerize during cementation, I'm talking about, right? And then you place the restoration. At least this small area will be taken care of. But if you look at my book, Maxime, there is a page where I can actually show you right now. Oops, excuse me, my phone fell off. And I want to show you something right now directly from the book here. And okay, as you see, this is my my worn off version here. And so if I go to the chapter about immediate dentin sealing, you will see a picture of a case that failed. And that failed because half of the preparation was treated with immediate dentin sealing and half of the preparation was not treated with immediate dentin sealing. Very interesting. And so the veneer fractured half. So you have, after 5 years, half of the veneer was gone, the mesial half was intact, and the distal half was broken. I'm looking for it right now.
So we can say that IDS actually improves bonding strength for indirect restoration.
Exactly. And so the half side that fractured, and this is not in the book, but it will be in the next book, but the half side that fractured, we bonded it back with IDS. And that was 20 years ago.
Wow.
And so, and that veneer is still working as we speak. Perfect. After 5 years, it failed because one side was placed without IDS.
Okay.
And it was repaired with IDS, and it lasts another 15 years.
Wow. So actually, now we have proof that IDS actually increases bonding strength.
It's not a proof, but I'm just telling you, it's anecdotal, but of course we have scientific proof. And by the way, Marco Gresnik just published a clinical study about
Yeah, I
IBS where,
read the article, and I
yeah,
have these protocols. It's
and
amazing.
that relates directly to the question you sent me some questions, and one of the questions was, you know, about when you have a large dentin exposures. And so if you have more than 50% of dentin exposed, that's considered a large exposure. That's not a reason to do a crown. Of course not. That's a reason to do IDS and bond. And the prognosis of this veneer will be the
So this is
same
the
as
study, the
another
poll,
one. Exactly, exactly.
and
So
this is the
I
numbers
think,
of the people.
yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
we'll come
I
back
mean,
to
it's
the.
reversed now, but I
Okay,
guess, yeah,
sorry.
I know. I
I will
know
go
what's
back to this.
the
I'll go back to
yeah,
this. I
the
would like to give
opinion.
some clinical tips for the audience when we have indirect preparations like crowns, for example, which you don't know, or veneers, let's say, and we have dentin exposure and we don't have cavity. So basically, we are working with a flat or plain surface, and we have to do the IDS in proper way. So I would like to give my tips and tricks because I also have experience with that for about 8 years.
Mhm.
Clinical experience. I can prove it
Good,
works.
very good,
So
very
basically,
good,
what we
very
do,
good.
actually, we have in classic way, we have 3 steps of preparation, like initial prep, rough preparation, then final prep finishing, and let's say polishing or refining the margins, which is step 3. So basically, what I do, we finish step 1, and we notice that we have exposed dentin. Then we go to step 2 with the red diamond burr. During step 2, we can expose dentin a little bit more. Unfortunately, it happens. So then afterwards, I realized that I will go with IDS, and I have to utilize thick layer of adhesive, which is about, as you said, about 50 or 70 microns, right? It has to be the thickness of the bonding agent has to be 50 or 60 microns, which is pretty thick. We have to keep this in our mind because if the adhesive will be thin, it will be not polymerized correctly. This I'm repeating your words. And during cementation procedure, when you will air abrade the tooth, your IDS may disappear. So basically, it has to be thick. So in that case, what we have to keep in our mind, when we open dentin and we finished step 2 preparation, I go a little bit more in dentin just to give me some space to get this thickness
Yes,
for IDS.
especially when you are close to the margins, especially when you are close to the margin. And I would say, if your margin is indenting, it's not a problem, but your chamfer has to be a little bit deeper, maybe 1 or 2 tenths deeper to make the space for Optibond FL. Yes.
Perfect.
So my chamfer would turn into a very mini shoulder, if you want. And when you apply FL, you know, in this shoulder, it will naturally flow and create a chamfer.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, when we have margins in enamel, so in this case, after step 2, we give ourselves a little bit more space for the IDS. We light cure it, we put air block, we light cure again, and then I use disc or rubber just to refine my enamel, and then I take my diamond burr red low speed just to refine my margin in enamel to keep it free from
Yeah.
adhesive. That is important. But if I have my margin in dentin, I go for all 3 steps of preparations, and as you mentioned, I create a little bit more thicker space in marginal area, which is dentin nowadays. It's not enamel, unfortunately, to keep space for the Optimon FL or for flowable composite, just to give myself enough thickness for the IDS. Then we light cure, then we air block. Then before we take impression, we, as you said, you have to get some pumice paste or whatever just to remove this oxygen inhibited layer to take a proper impression.
Right,
Correct?
right. And just to tell you, it's funny, one day I was talking to patients I treated back when I was staying in Switzerland, you know, more than 15 years ago. I think I treated that patient like 7 or 18 years ago. And it was a case of severe erosion. But Maxim, very, like when we prepped, and we had like, you know, some teeth, it was 80–90% of dentin exposed. And Michel, of course, did the feldspathic, not Emax, because this is another thing I see people, of course, we can also make this very important conclusion. The more you bond, the less you need strong materials. And feldspathic is good when it's even bonded to dentin, when the dentin bond is correct. And so this case was made with creation porcelain 17 years ago. And guess what? Dentin margins. Those teeth, many of the people in your survey would have done a crown instead, right?
Yeah, sure. That is the problem number 3 that I raised up. People still don't know which way to go, to do crown or to do veneer or minimally invasive restorations, because they don't have correct protocol and they don't believe in adhesive dentistry. This is the thing.
Right.
But once they will have results, they will get confidence, and then we'll switch into the minimally invasive approach in restorative dentistry, for sure.
Really.
So let us do summary. We have to, sorry?
Yeah, I really hope that you guys who are listening, all that we discussed today will help you get a better experience with IDS. And of course, the devil is in the detail. So it's like you have to consider all these elements we discussed. I think we really covered it all. Otherwise, there's lots of articles. There's a huge amount of literature about IDS, most of which, thanks God, is positive. And if there are still some few articles that say, well, it doesn't make a difference, look carefully how they did it. And you will discover that some of those articles, they didn't respect the principles that we talked about today. Yeah.
Okay, so let me do some summary. So IDS clinically gives you way less postoperative sensitivity, gives you better bonding strength for indirect restoration, which is proved clinically, and it can give you possibility to go for less invasive types of restorations, which means you prep less and you benefit out of the biological environment that you protect. So that is proved. Yes, it takes time. We have to admire that we have to spend our time for the IDS, but again, it is not spending of our time, it is investment, as you said. And
you know what, Maxime? I remember what you just said. When you put your seat belt, you know, it takes a few seconds to put the seat belt, right? So IDS is that. It's your seat belt, okay? Invest in the seat belt, please.
Yeah, perfect. So I really appreciate your time. Just three
quick
questions. Let's do a really quick 3 questions for you. I will ask you questions without thinking, and you will answer without thinking, okay? Really quickly.
First. Okay, let me cut the connection here.
Yeah, it's simple questions. First, CAD/CAM or manual?
Both.
Okay.
Hybrid.
Hybrid. Okay, zirconia or glass ceramic?
Oh, glass ceramic. Easy.
Okay. Glass ceramic or composite?
Okay, I'm going to tell you composite, but that would require an explanation.
Yeah, it depends for sure. It depends. Just the funny questions. Okay, that's Absolutely. Perfect. I hope that people enjoyed this conversation, that they got a lot of clinical tips from real master, from primary source of the IDS concept. Actually, yeah, it is concept. And Pascal, I'm really thankful for your time, for your efforts, for all the contribution that you made for dentistry. And I really suggest for all of my followers, my people, to see Pascal in live, to attend his courses, to buy and to read the book, because it is Bible, and to read all the articles that Pascal and his team actually publish in the field of adhesive dentistry, because they are professional, life-changing. Thank you very much, Pascal.
Thank you, Maxime. God bless you all. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, Maxime.
Bye-bye. Thank you.